maybe money doesn't grow on trees. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Children should be seen and not heard. Do as I say, not as I do. And the one that I'm going to be focusing on today is we don't waste food. The detrimental effects of this, we don't waste food. If they aren't sitting there guilting and shaming themselves into eating more than their body needs so as to not waste the food, then why am I that stuffing myself with more food than my body needs does not help anyone else that is hungry? Hello and welcome to this episode of Piece by Pieces. I'm your host, Ashley Hutt. I'm a brain engineer, a certified hypnotherapist, and a rapid transformational therapy practitioner. Now, this means that I have some intimate knowledge of the subconscious mind and how the roots that were placed during the first few years of our lives have turned into beliefs and stories that we tell ourselves through our entire life until we choose to consciously go back and take a look at things and examine them. And today I'm going to share a personal story that is something that a lot of people can identify with. A lot of people can resonate with it. A lot of people have this common framework that is cultural, which is why. And so it's a cultural framework that most of us have experienced. And it's also a generational framework that a lot of us have experienced. And it's also an example of a story or belief framework that is on the surface good or beneficial, or that's what it seems to be. And yet the effects of that can be detrimental. Now, there are lots of flavors and colors of this type of thing. Okay, so we all have these like cultural and generational kind of frameworks that that we've heard of, that we've at least heard of. Maybe we carry them in this. Maybe we live our life by them. Some of them are like, maybe money doesn't grow on trees. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Children should be seen and not heard. Do as I say, not as I do. And the one that I'm going to be focusing on today is we don't waste food. Now, I think that we can all agree that we all aim to not waste food. We understand that food is a resource and it's something that all humans need. And we all have a concept of there being humans that have more than enough and that that's never an issue, and that there are people that don't have enough and that go hungry. And that's going to play into this too. And I believe that we all want there to be enough food for everybody and for everybody to have enough food, and not just any food, but nutritious food, like fueling your body type of food. So with that, let's move on to the detrimental effects of this. We don't waste food. Now, this is coming from a reel that I posted several weeks ago now, but it was about my daughter. I made some food for my daughter and she literally took 2 bites of it and said she was done. There's more to the story, but the comments from people, a lot of them were about save the food for later. She can eat it for a snack later. Guess who's having egg sandwiches for dinner? Don't waste it. Like someone will eat, like all around the not wasting of the food. So that's what kind of like brought this to the forefront of my mind. We don't waste food. And there are starving children in Africa. You've heard these before, right? You've probably said those before, right? You've definitely thought that before, right? And like how many times? Over and over and over again, right? Like, and especially if you have kids, you might be saying that daily, like, we don't waste food, eat all your food, don't waste the food. But have you ever stopped to assess these claims, these words that you say and think? What are you making it mean? Is there additional meaning that you're placing on it? What is the effect of it on your life, on the lives of your family, and on future generations? And does it have any actual benefit to those that you're taking into consideration? I once lived with 4 other people, my husband and my 3 stepkids. We're divorced now. But I once lived with them, when I lived with them, when we first moved in together, um, these these four people seemingly did not give much thought to wasting food. They would pour a whole glass of a drink, only to drink this much of it and set it down. They would eat part of their plate and leave a whole bunch. They had no problem throwing out food or wasting food as it looked to me. And this bothered me a lot. It bothered me a lot because in that particular time, during that time, I was the one that was paying for the food. I had paid for the food. I was the one that worked to earn the money to pay for the food. I was the one that cooked the food. And I was the one that, by God, I'm not going to let this food go to waste. And I was the one that ate and drank the food that they left behind so that it didn't go to waste. And do you know what that got me? Do you know what that got me? 30 extra pounds on my body that 6 years later I'm still releasing. That's what that got me. That default mental programming of we don't waste food, with roots in childhood, reinforced by 30 plus years of lived experience and common experience. That's something that we all heard, or most of us. Common, culturally approved belief, thought that influenced my physical actions and behavior that led to physically harming my own health. My body didn't need or want that food that would go to waste. Neither did their bodies. So it wasn't about them needing to eat more. Their bodies didn't need that extra food either, or they would have eaten it. But my brain, with its programming and conditioning, said we don't waste food. And our thoughts influence our emotions and our behaviors. My brain said we don't waste food because I had heard that through my entire life. And it was tied to other pieces of my life. It was tied to, I cooked it. I earned the money. I used my money to buy the food. It was tied to a lot of other things, right? But it culminated into we don't waste food. Now I don't like wasting food, and I don't like harming my physical health either. I don't like eating more than my body needs. I don't like eating things that I don't even want just for the sake that they don't go to waste. So I don't like wasting food, and I don't like wasting money, and I don't like harming my physical health either. So which is a higher priority? Which is the thing that maybe we can let go of a little bit, or release the meaning around it, or release the guilt around it, or release the resentment around it? And one day, around the time that I noticed my body's getting a little bit fluffier and fast, and why? Oh, it's probably because I'm eating the leftovers of everybody so that it doesn't go to waste. Well, I don't want to gain this weight. So what am I doing? And that led me to think about the other trope in this area of there are starving children in Africa. Now, I grew up in the 80s, so this is probably a generational thing. I don't know if people say this today, because the truth is there are starving children everywhere. There's probably starving children in your neighborhood. They're certainly in your town and your city and your state and your country. I don't know why it was the starving children in Africa that got made into this idea, this belief. But that particular thing led me to consider that these four other people in my house, my ex-husband and his three kids, they while they didn't come from Africa, they did come from a place where food was sometimes scarce. They are Dominican. They are from the Dominican Republic. And they did come from a place where food was sometimes scarce, a place that you didn't have to look very far to see families and children that didn't have enough. They were their neighbors. And it was a place that I lived for 2.5 years during my Peace Corps service. So I know. And then I thought, so if they, my husband and his kids, who had actually seen and experienced real hunger themselves, their families, their neighbors, etc., if they aren't sitting there guilting and shaming themselves into eating more than their body needs so as to not waste the food, then why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? And then in that moment, I allowed the clarity that in that particular moment, that moment in time, with that particular food that would have been thrown out or wasted, that if I didn't eat it, that there was no literal, logical, or physical connection to anyone else anywhere that may be experiencing hunger at that very moment. Because it was not like I would package up that food and take it to my neighbor who was hungry for them to eat, or to go down to the overpass in the middle of town and give it to a person that doesn't have a home, or put it in a box and ship it to starving children in Africa. You see, there was no actual literal connection there between this food in front of me and people that are hungry. And that by me eating that, that does not help the people that are hungry. It was a nonsensical argument, a guilting, coercive belief to override the needs of my own body and my own physical health. That stuffing myself with more food than my body needs does not help anyone else that is hungry. So I stopped. I stopped harming myself physically. I stopped judging them for wasting food. I let go of the resentment that I was feeling towards them. I broke those molds. I broke that mental default conditioning that started long before I was even born. I chose differently, even though it goes against that culturally and commonly accepted norm. And this is my work. This is the work that I do on myself. This is the work that I guide my clients through. There are many different flavors of this format, this cause and effect, this story, belief, etc., that is having this detrimental effect on our physical body, our mental body, our lives, our emotional body. There's something that exists in your reality right now, something that's undesirable, like 10 extra pounds that was growing at that moment. There is something that is sabotaging your highest good, your health, your ability to love and be loved, your purpose, and your very life. There's something, habit, behavior, thought pattern, a default, something created by your default programming that influences your behaviors. There is so much shiz running on autopilot, rinsing and repeating. Patterns, you've noticed them, right? You've noticed them. What are you doing about it? The first step is noticing that you are in a pattern. The second step is getting off that hamster wheel, getting off that roundabout, getting off that pattern, choosing something differently. I guide you to pause, to ponder, to examine, to question, with love and curiosity, and not shame and blame. It's very important to look at something and really ask, why? Why is this happening? Why am I doing this? What does that even mean? Where did that come from? Is that even true? Is that benefiting me? What does that actually entail? How can I choose differently? What change can I make? To receive clarity, to decide for yourself, to shift that gifted default that you've accepted through your life, to shift that to a chosen default moving forward, consciously and subconsciously. And you can do this on your own, of course. I believe it's much better with support, not better, easier and more effective when you have the support and the encouragement of other women that are doing the same thing. And it's not just the support and the encouragement, it's also the sharing of experiences of one that another can come in and give a different perspective with love and support. And that each of our own unique stories overlaps lovingly on top of one another, and that there's parts that match up and there's parts that are opposite, but then we could get the opportunity to see the same situation from the perspective of someone else. And it opens up this world of self-love and compassion, but also love and understanding and patience and empathy and compassion for others. And that's exactly what we're doing in my Break the Mold Club. In this club, it's virtual. We meet twice a week, group of women, all moving through this type of work with the resources of my courses, workshops, and brain retraining tools, and my guidance through the calls to move us all forward in this human experience. If you're curious to know more, the link is in the notes below. Round 1 started in the middle of March, and the doors for round 1 close at the end of March. But if it's before the end of March, you are still able to join us for this round. The second round will start in June. I'd love to have you in there with us. And if not, that's totally fine too. My courses, workshops, and brain retraining tools are always available to you. You can find those at the link in the notes as well. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Piece by Pieces. We'll see you next time. Love ya.